The top 10 pro tennis matches 1927 to 1967. 10. Riggs vs. Budge US Pro Final 1947. Although Bobby Riggs had managed to beat a past prime Donald Budge on the 1946 World Series Tour, he had only done so by the narrowest of margins. The 1947 US Pro Final was played in front of 7,000 enthusiastic fans at Forest Hills, that watched us for 2.5 hours. The artisan of the only Grand Slam in history fought Riggs all over the carpet of turf, with every ounce of energy he could summon, according to Alison Danzig. Riggs won 3-6, 6-3, 10-8, 4-6, 6-4, 9. Anderson vs. Segura Wembley Pro Final 1959. At 38 years old, Pancho Segura had never won the Wembley title, but he came close against Mal Anderson in the 1959 final. Segura had 2 match points of 5-4 in the final set, and hit a lob an inch beyond the baseline on one of them. Anderson won 4-6, 6-4, 3-6, 6-3, 8-6, 8. Hoad vs. Gonzales World Series Melbourne 1958. Pancho Gonzales had a tough opponent on the 1958 World Series Tour, Lou Hoad. The series usually comprised best-of-3 set matches, but in 1957 and 1958, the tours opened in Australia with best-of-5 set matches. In the match at Kooyong, a full-capacity crowd cheered on Hoad. In some of the best tennis ever seen at Kooyong, both players served, volleyed, and smashed brilliantly. Gonzales led by a set and a break, but Hoad won 4-6, 9-7. 11-9, 18-16. 7. Vines vs. Perry US Pro Final, 1939. The 1939 US Pro Final was one of the last meetings between two great rivals, Ellsworth Vines and Fred Perry. Vines retired shortly afterwards and turned his attention to golf. Vines seemed on course for victory when he led 2-1 and 5-2. Perry hit some incredible shots to draw level at 5-all. The epic set continued. Perry served for the set at 15-14, but Vines broke back and Ellsworth eventually won 8-6, 6-8, 6-1, 2018 in 3.5 hours. 6. Gonzales vs. Rosewall US Pro Indoors Final 1964. Pancho Gonzales had retired at World Champion in 1961. Then Ken Rosewall took over the mantle. In 1964, Gonzales returned when Ken was at the peak of his powers. In the final of the US Pro Indoors at White Plains, Rosewall seemed on course for victory, leading 2-0 and 4-1, with 2 breaks in the third set. But in a storybook comeback, the 36-year-old Pancho started serving much better and fought back to win in a match lasting 3 hours 11 minutes, which was long for these times, when players didn't take much time between points and games. The score 5-7, 3-6, 10-8, 11-9, 8-6, 5. Rosewall vs. Laver French Pro Final 1963. The French Pro Final, held indoors at Stade Coubertin Stadium in Paris, was one of the early meetings in a major tournament between two great rivals, Ken Rosewall and Rod Laver. Rosewall was well ahead of Laver in 1963, but in this match, Laver was in good form. In his autobiography, Education of a Tennis Player, Laver said, "I played the finest tennis I believe I've ever produced, and he beat me. It was a magnificent match on a whizzing wood floor, and we hit ground strokes as though we were on slow clay. I led 4-1 in the 5th, and just ran out of gas." Rosewall won 6-8, 6-4, 5-7, 6-3, 6-4. 4. Kramer vs. Budge US Pro Semi-Final 1948. A crowd of 9,000 at Forest Hills witnessed a classic semi-final in the US Pro, the top major tournament of 1948. Donald Budge was 33 by now and past his best. Jack Kramer was at the peak of his powers. Yet Budge played by far the finest tennis to come from his racket since the days of his omnipotence before the war, according to Alison Danzig, led by 2-1 and 4-3 with a break, with the crowd roaring him on. Time and again, Kramer hit forcing shots to the corners and came in for the kill, and Budge shot amazing forehands and backhands past the stunned Kramer. Sadly, after leading 2-1 and 4-3, Budge ran out of energy and didn't win another game. Kramer won 6-4, 8-10, 3-6, 6-4, 6-0, 3. Gonzales vs. Kramer Wembley Pro Final 1952. Jack Kramer had won the 1949-50 World Series Tour against Pancho Gonzales easily, after which Gonzales was cast out into the pro tennis wilderness. By 1952, Kramer was still the world champion and faced Gonzales in the Wembley final, one of the biggest tournaments of the year. There was no World Tour that year and Kramer had not played much, but Jack's immaculate fluency and majestic power came close to giving him the unwritten world title according to the London Times. Kramer led 4-1 in the fifth set, but Gonzales fought back. When both men were level at 5, all the capacity crowd at Wembley was in a delirium of excitement that I have rarely seen there, and is not often seen even at Wimbledon, according to the Times correspondent, who said it was one of the greatest matches in professional lawn tennis. Gonzales won 3-6, 3-6, 6-2, 6-4, 7-5. 2. Laver vs. Rosewall Wembley Pro Final 1964. In 1964, Ken Rosewall and Rod Laver were involved in a close battle for number 1. Although Rosewall finished top of the tournament point standings, it was close between the two of them. In a 2 3/4 hour epic comprising 62 games, a capacity crowd at Wembley witnessed a 5-set thriller. Rosewall led by 2-1 and a break, and in the 5th set Ken led 5-3, but Laver won 7-5, 5-7, 4-6, 8-6, 8-6. The London Times said one could argue into any number of dawns whether or not it equaled that 1956 gem which has always stood as the jewel at the centre of the showcase. 1. Gonzales vs. Sedgman Wembley Pro Final 1956. Pancho Gonzales was at the peak of his powers in 1956, when he faced Frank Sedgman in the Wembley final. In the first 2 sets the proportion of outright winners was high, more than 60%. Sedgman began in peak form, he led by a set and 4 games to 1. Gonzales finally won the second set 11-9. Gonzales won 4-6, 11-9, 11-9, 9-7. The London Times said, "The superb touch of both players on the volley, the anticipation and judgment in close driving to the lines, and the ease with which both reached apparently impossible shots, had to be seen to be believed." When the match ended, it was well into Sunday morning. BBC Television was the host broadcaster of the Wembley event, and covered the match live throughout. The match lasted 3 hours and ended at 12:35 a.m.